destructive side of alcohol. And by that I mean, this is when you're a cop and you show up and the guy T-boned a telephone pole and it didn't end well, and you call the fire department not to help the guy, but to come out with a hose to clean off the road. I'm not trying to be gross. I'm just trying to paint a picture to give you an idea that alcohol, which we have plenty of and is everywhere, can be just as addictive and just as dangerous as any of these hard narcotics. So I'm having difficulty seeing alcohol being legalized and looking at hard narcotics and trying to say, well, the argument there is different. Because to me, the abuse can be just as high, depending on the individual, and the destructive tendencies of it can be similar, if not identical. We can argue about the effects of what heroin does versus alcohol, but you have alcohol poisoning if you want to get into that. I just feel that the moral equivalency argument kind of falls flat. Your response?
Okay. I think one of the things that helps us with alcohol, maybe not enough, is that, if you get caught drunk driving, it's pretty serious. If you're drunk and you hit somebody, it's pretty serious. Driving under the influence, I think, is one of those moderating things that helps with that regard. And again, you're right in the sense that, yes, you can be just as addicted to alcohol and you can do pretty terrible things. I just think that the physical effects are more immediate and worse with heroin, crack, coke, that kind of thing, as opposed to it is for alcohol. Alcohol tends to, not all the time, but tends to be something that destroys a person over time, and also gives you more of a chance to try to fix them and stop them from doing that to themselves.
Well, with regards, meth does the same thing. It's not an immediate; it's over time. So.
No, just look at the faces of meth that you see on.
Oh my gosh!
Online. I got to interrupt the discussion for a second because we do have a hard break at the bottom of the hour. We'll be back in really just a minute. This is Saturday Night Cigar Lounge here on Vigilant Liberty Radio. When we get back, I want to talk stop and frisk because that's a really complicated subject. So let's talk that. We'll be right back. This is Saturday Night Cigar Lounge here on Vigilant Liberty Radio. Back after this.
Hi, this is Jazz Shaw. Be sure to join Doug Mataconis and me at 9 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays for Flitter Nerds Radio, here on Vigilant Liberty Radio. It's not as much about the politics as the people behind the politics. That's Flitter Nerds Radio, Thursdays at 9 Eastern on Vigilant Liberty Radio.
We want to welcome Michael Moore to Occupy Wall Street. I'm so impressed by what I'm seeing here.
How much of people's income do you, Michael Moore, want the government to confiscate?
Probably twice what we're paying right now.
It's not envy, it's war.
Where's the rage? Where's the uprising?
Storm the doors of the New York Stock Exchange.
It is a class war.
If the wealthy paid their fair share.
For a documentary filmmaker, I do really well. I'm very blessed.
And the rich thought poverty was bad.
I do well.
They get rid of it.
What pure? There's nothing pure about capitalism.
And they know what's coming on Wall Street.
We're seeing the end of capitalism. And I say good riddance.
He is one of my favorite capitalists. Yeah, I want to give him a hug.
Hi, this is Mike Grell, creator of John Sable Freelance, and you're listening to Vigilant Liberty Radio.
Hi, this is Alan Bordias of VLR's Their Finest Hour in the Roundtable of Extreme Liberty. It's time for the only man with both a grudge list and a troll-worthy forehead, Taylor Millard, here on the Saturday Night Cigar Lounge.
Back here on Saturday Night Cigar Lounge here on Vigilant Liberty Radio. I'm your host, Taylor Millard. We have Lucy Steigerwald from antiwar.com here, as well as George Templeton, Peter Ream, and Stefan Glaug from Free Radical Network. Guys, thank you very much for being here. We did have a question from the chat room, and I bet that those who know him will know immediately who made this comment. So there's no cultural difference between having a scotch on the rocks in somebody's house versus shooting up via a needle in the back of a convenience store. Really? Again, this is where losertarians lose me.
Oh, sir.
Hey, hang on. I'm
Libertarians. Oh, that's such a new one. I haven't heard that before. Go on.
Hang on. Do Peter, Stefan, and George want to guess who made who asked that question?
I'm going to hazard a guess and say no. I'm not going to hazard a guess.
I cheated and looked at the chat, so I can't answer.
It was Titan. So nobody should be surprised.
Oh, well, Titan. What does he know? His Arizona team is out of the playoffs. I'm sorry, that was a low blow.
All right, let's address that, and then we'll move on to stop and frisk. You want to address it first, Lucy?
Well, that's a bad question. It's a bad and lazy question. All it's saying is, I am comfortable with scotch, and I'm not comfortable with heroin, and you know what? Me too, but that doesn't speak to any of the practical effects of prohibition on hard drugs. That's just, it's not a good question. It's just saying I don't like heroin. No one here said they liked heroin, dude. That's all.
Peter?
I think that the question is wrongly phrased, because what you have is he says, hey, I can have a little scotch at home in the comfort of my own home, but I'm not comfortable with somebody shooting up heroin behind a gas and sip. Well, you know what? I'm not comfortable with somebody drinking behind a gas and sip. So my question would be, would Titan be comfortable if a responsible person in society went home after work and in the comfort of their own home had a little bit of crack or heroin or whatever, and then after they came down from whatever high they were on, went to work and were a productive member of society? I mean, honestly, that's the question I have. There are people that do that with alcohol on the weekends, and
there are people who've done that with hard drugs. Like, honestly, there are functioning hard drug addicts in the world. They're just hard to see.
Yeah. I think that when he draws the parallel between the person behind the gas and sip versus the person that's at home, it's not the same. It's not the same comparison. You have to do apples to apples. So that would be my only question to him, to Titan.
All right. Let's see what Titan said was it's not a good question because you can't argue the difference. That's what his response in the chat was. I don't know.
You can't argue the difference. There's a difference between shooting up hard drugs behind a convenience store and doing it at home where nobody sees. One says I have or I don't really care where I do it. I'm just going to do it. The other one says I'm choosing to be responsible about what I do. If a guy's drinking scotch behind a convenience store, I'm sorry, but that falls in the same category as somebody who's doing hard drugs. Please tell me the difference. I mean, we do have laws against public intoxication for a reason. So it is regulated in a way. It's not like you can just booze anywhere you want.
Anybody else want to weigh in before we move on to Stop and Frisk?
Nah, I'm fine.
Okay. George?
Not me either.
All right. So let's move on to Stop and Frisk. One of the things that I have to thank Politics of John for saying that it was indeed the Fourth Amendment allows a stop and frisk based on the Terry versus Ohio decision in June of 1968. Politics of John, thank you. I appreciate it. And the question now, I will say this, just my opinion is that just because the Supreme Court says something unconstitutional doesn't necessarily make it constitutional.
Seconded. Seriously.
I'm just saying that. But as I'm playing moderator here, I want to read the Fourth Amendment, and then we'll get into the debates of it. And George, I want to start with you on it after I read the Fourth Amendment, because you're strongly in favor of stop and frisk. But let me read this first. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. That's the Fourth Amendment. Go right ahead, George, because, like I said, I know you like stop and frisk.
I
think
think
it's necessary. I don't know if you
it's
like
necessary.
it.
It's necessary in New York, and I go back to, and I'm going to date myself a little bit because I actually remember the first time when Rudy Giuliani ran for mayor. Before he became mayor, New York was called Fear City because it was rife with very violent crime. When they say 2,000 people were murdered a year, they're not exaggerating. That is exactly what was going on in the late 80s and into 1990. And, they instituted stop and frisk among many other things to try to get a handle on this. And it did absolutely reduce crime. That is undeniable. I mean, there were other factors too, but stop and frisk really made a major difference. Now, not every city should have it. It's not right for every city. Not every city needs it. But, standards are different in different parts of the country. And for me, at least when it comes to New York, it's not unreasonable. When you talk about a city that's as big as New York is, that's had the problems with crime that it has, it's not unreasonable to have stop and frisk. Now it's getting abused. We've seen evidence of that people have had quotas that they've had to make to reach with stop and frisk, and you can't have that. It's got to be exactly what it said on the tin, which is reasonable suspicion. You see somebody, you think they might be up to something bad, you stop them, you look at them, you check them over and make sure they don't have something they're not supposed to have, or they're not going to do something they're not supposed to do. And so for me, the problem we've got is that it's like any policy, there is drift. And people start to misuse it and abuse it a little bit. And there have been plenty of stories about it in New York. But in general, if you keep it where it was to its original intent, stop and frisk is very useful. And at least in New York City, it's very necessary. And I would also point to this: when you look at the violence in the South Side of Chicago and some of these other big cities, you have to wonder if stop and frisk wouldn't at least help in trying to contain the difficulties that those cities are having. It's not for everybody. Let me say that. It is not for everybody, and it would be much better if we didn't have to have it. But at least in New York, they had to have it, and it's worked, and I think it would work in other big cities also.
George, are you from New York?
I'm not.
Okay, I was about to say, because if you were from New York, my next question was going to be, how in the world are you a Redskins fan?
No, I'm not from New York. I'm from suburban Washington, D.C., and quite frankly, I mean, things are a lot better now, but in the 80s and 90s, when I was living near that area, stop and frisk would have been very helpful, because there was a lot of bad stuff going on in parts of that city, especially, and I mean, it's subway, just outside of subway stops and that sort of thing, and I think stop and frisk would have been a very useful tool. At least in those days, in trying to curtail crime.
All right, Stefan, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I don't like the idea of stop and frisk. I think it's a horrible idea. Just to stop people, just to stop them. I know they're trying to cut down on crime. I just think, they're. As far as that goes, that's a privacy thing. If you're breaking a law, or they suspect you of breaking a law, that's a different story. But a lot of these frivolous laws, especially in New York, it's more like the cops there are tax collectors. They're collecting taxes for the city more than anything else. That's one thing I saw. I know politics of John too. He said